In 1677, two Dutch printers in Amsterdam made a decision that would get them arrested within weeks. They published a book that had been hidden in a drawer for months, waiting for its author to die. The author was Baruch Spinoza, and the book was his ethics. And what these printers did not realize was that this book contained something so dangerous that the Catholic Church would ban it for the next 200 years. This was not just any philosophy book. It was a systematic dismantling of everything the Church had taught about good and evil. And buried in its pages was a claim so radical that even today most people cannot accept it. Spinoza argued that the devil does not exist, not as a fallen angel, not as a cosmic enemy of God, not as a tempter of souls. The devil, according to Spinoza, was a fiction, an invention, a tool of control. And he did not stop there. He went further. He explained exactly why the Church invented the devil, how they built the entire mythology from mistranslated texts, and what they gained by keeping billions of people terrified of an enemy that never existed. And these are not just theological claims. They are historical facts that have been meticulously erased from modern religious education, because the original Hebrew Bible, the one that Christianity claims to be based on, mentions no devil, no Satan as an evil god, no cosmic rebellion, no fall from heaven, nothing. Today, you are going to uncover the true story of how religion invented the devil, and when it is over, you will never look at religious authority the same way again. Have you ever wondered why Christianity needs a devil while Judaism survived for thousands of years without one? The Bible, it offers no clear answer. The Old Testament mentions Satan only a handful of times, and never as the evil cosmic force you have been taught about. But why? Christians believe in a devil who rebelled against God, who fell from heaven, who now rules hell and tempts humanity into sin. Jews, reading the exact same Hebrew scriptures, believe no such thing. They see Satan as a job title, not a name, as a prosecutor in God's court, not an enemy of God. An enemy of God. So why the difference? The Church's official answer is that the New Testament revealed the full truth about Satan that was hidden in the Old Testament, that Jesus exposed the devil's true nature, that the early Church Fathers clarified what the ancient Hebrews only dimly understood. But that is not in the original texts. It is an interpretation added centuries later by people who had specific reasons for needing a devil to exist. The original Hebrew text of Job, the oldest book that mentions Satan, shows him in God's heavenly court. He is there with the other angels. He reports to God. He asks God's permission before testing Job. He works for God, not against God. There is no rebellion, no fall from heaven, no cosmic battle between good and evil. The word itself, Satan, comes from the Hebrew hasatan, and in Hebrew this is not a name, it is a title. It means the adversary, the accuser, the prosecutor. It is a role, not a being, like saying the president or the judge. It describes a function, not an individual entity. But the Church needed more than a prosecutor. They needed an enemy, a cosmic threat, a source of all evil that was not God. And so they took this minor character from Jewish scripture and transformed him into the central villain of Christian theology. But here is the problem. That transformation required changing the meaning of texts, mistranslating key words, and importing ideas from religions that Judaism explicitly rejected. And the Church did all of this deliberately. But the Zoroastrian texts, the Persian religious documents from the 6th century before Christ, they do explain. And the explanation reveals exactly where Christianity got its devil. And it is deeply troubling. The book of Job opens with a scene that most Christians never discuss. God is holding court in heaven. The angels present themselves before him, and among them is Satan, the Satan, the adversary. He is not sneaking in, he is not disguised. He is there as part of the regular proceedings, and God speaks to him directly, casually, like a supervisor speaking to an employee. God asks the Satan where he has been. The Satan responds that he has been roaming the earth, observing. God then points out Job, his faithful servant. And here is where it gets interesting. The Satan does not tempt God. He does not trick God. He simply offers a professional opinion. He says that Job is only faithful because God has blessed him. Remove the blessings, and Job will curse God. This is not rebellion. This is analysis. This is what a prosecutor does. He challenges the evidence. And God agrees to the test. He gives the Satan permission to afflict Job. First his possessions, then his health, but not his life. And the Satan obeys these limits precisely. He does exactly what he was authorized to do, nothing more. And when the test is complete, the Satan disappears from the story. He does not celebrate Job's suffering. He does not claim victory. He simply fulfilled his function and moved on. This is not the devil of Christian theology. This is a member of God's staff doing his assigned job. In the book of Zechariah, written centuries after Job, we see the Satan again. The high priest Joshua is standing before the angel of the Lord, and the Satan is standing at his right hand to accuse him. Again, this is a courtroom scene. The angel of the Lord, acting as judge, rebukes the Satan, not because the Satan is evil, but because the accusation is rejected. This is legal procedure, not cosmic warfare. But here is where the confusion begins. In 1 Chronicles chapter 21, it says that Satan incited David to take a census of Israel. This sounds like the devil tempting a king, right? But there is a problem. The same story appears in 2 Samuel chapter 24. And in that version, it was God who incited David to take the census, not Satan. Same event, same sin. But one text blames God, and the other blames Satan. What happened? Scholars agree that Chronicles was written much later than Samuel, probably after the Babylonian exile. And by that time, Jewish theology had changed. They had become uncomfortable with the idea that God directly causes people to sin. So when they retold the story in Chronicles, they inserted Satan as an intermediary. God wanted the census to happen, so he sent his Satan, his adversary, to provoke it. This is not a rebel angel acting against God's will. This is God's agent executing God's plan. But translators later removed the article "the" and turned Ha-Satan into Satan, making it seem like a personal name rather than a job title. And this is the crucial point. In the original Hebrew Bible, there is no independent evil force. There is no cosmic enemy of God. There is only God, his angels, and among those angels, one whose job is to test and accuse. Nothing more. Everything changed in 586 before Christ, when Babylon conquered Jerusalem. The Jewish people were taken into exile, their temple was destroyed, their kingdom was ended, and for nearly 70 years they lived under foreign rule in Babylon and later under Persian rule. And it was during this exile that they encountered Zoroastrianism, the religion of Persia. And Zoroastrianism had something Judaism lacked. It had a cosmic dualism. It taught that the universe was a battleground between two equal and opposite forces. Ahura Mazda, the god of light and truth and goodness, and Angra Mainyu, later called Ahriman, the god of darkness and lies and evil. These were not a god and his employee. These were enemies. Ahriman did not serve Ahura Mazda, he opposed him. He had his own army of demons. He corrupted creation. He tempted humans. He was the source of all suffering and sin. And the universe was caught in an eternal struggle between these two powers. The Jews had never believed anything like this. Their scriptures taught that God was absolutely sovereign, that he created everything, light and darkness, good and evil, that nothing happened without his permission. But Zoroastrianism offered something appealing. It solved the problem of evil. If bad things happen, it is not because God wills them, it is because Ahriman opposes God. When the Jews returned to their land after the exile, they brought these ideas with them. And during the next 4 centuries, between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament, Jewish theology underwent a dramatic transformation. Books written during this period, books that did not make it into the official Bible, show this evolution clearly. The Book of Enoch, written around 300 before Christ, tells a story never mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. It says that a group of angels, called the Watchers, rebelled against God. They descended to earth. They took human women as wives. They taught humans forbidden knowledge. And their leader was a fallen angel. The book gives him names: Azazel, Semjaza, and it describes how God punished these rebels by imprisoning them in darkness until the final judgment. This is not biblical theology. This is Zoroastrian theology with Hebrew names. The idea of rebellious angels, of fallen divine beings, of demons teaching corruption, all of this comes from Persian influence. The Book of Jubilees, written around the same time, goes further. It identifies these fallen angels as the source of all evil in the world. It says they lead humans into sin. It says they will be judged and destroyed at the end of time. And it introduces the concept of a chief demon, Mastema, who is literally called the Satan, and who serves as the accuser and tempter of humanity. By the time of Jesus, this theology was widespread in certain Jewish groups, especially the Essenes who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. They believed in demons. They practiced exorcisms. They taught that the world was divided between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. They expected a final war between good and evil. All of this was new, all of this was foreign to the original Hebrew faith, but it had become normalized. When Christianity emerged, it inherited this late Jewish demonology and amplified it 1,000 times. The New Testament is filled with demons. Jesus casts them out constantly. Paul warns against spiritual forces of wickedness in heavenly places. The book of Revelation describes a war in heaven where the dragon, identified as that ancient serpent called the devil and Satan, is cast down to earth with his angels. And here is the crucial development. Christianity took all those scattered ideas from Enoch and Jubilees and Zoroastrianism and wove them into a single coherent narrative. Satan is the serpent from Genesis who tempted Eve. Satan is the fallen angel who rebelled out of pride. Satan is the ruler of demons. Satan is the accuser in Job. Satan is the tempter of Jesus in the wilderness. Satan is the dragon of Revelation. Satan is the dragon of Revelation. One being, one biography, one cosmic villain. But none of this is in the Old Testament. The serpent in Genesis is just a serpent. It is clever, but it is not supernatural. It is not identified as Satan anywhere in the Hebrew Bible. That connection was made centuries later by Christian interpreters who needed to unify the narrative. Isaiah chapter 14 contains a taunt against the king of Babylon. It mocks his pride and his fall from power. It uses poetic language, calling him the morning star, son of the dawn, Hillel ben Shahar in Hebrew. When this was translated into Latin, Hillel became Lucifer, which means light bearer, and Christian interpreters said this was not really about the king of Babylon. This was a hidden prophecy about Satan's fall from heaven. But the text itself never says this. The text is clearly, explicitly about a human king, not an angel. The same thing happened with Ezekiel chapter 28. It is a lament over the king of Tyre, describing his pride and downfall. It uses metaphorical language about being in Eden, being a guardian cherub, being cast out. And again, Christian interpreters said this was really about Satan's original rebellion. But the prophet himself was addressing a human ruler, using poetic imagery common in ancient Near Eastern literature. By the time of the early church fathers in the 3rd and 4th centuries after Christ, the entire mythology was complete. Origen wrote detailed descriptions of Satan's fall. Augustine explained how pride caused Lucifer to rebel. Gregory the Great organized demons into hierarchies. Aquinas catalogued their powers and limitations, and by the medieval period, the devil had a complete biography. He had a personality, he had a kingdom, he had a plan, he had an appearance, complete with horns and hooves and a pitchfork. But here is what you need to understand. None of this is biblical. It is all interpretation. It is all addition. It is all construction. The church took minor characters, ambiguous passages, and foreign ideas, and built an entire theology of evil that the original authors never intended, and would not recognize. Baruch Spinoza realized something that most philosophers before him had missed. The problem was not whether the devil exists. The problem was why the church needed the devil to exist. Because if you are the church, claiming to represent an all-powerful, all-knowing, perfectly good God, you have a serious logical problem, and that problem is evil. If God is all-powerful, he can prevent any evil from happening. If God is all-knowing, he knows about every evil before it occurs. If God is perfectly good, he would want to prevent all evil. But evil exists. Suffering exists. Injustice exists. Children die of disease. Innocent people are murdered. Natural disasters destroy entire cities. So either God cannot prevent evil, which means he is not all-powerful, or God does not know about evil, which means he is not all-knowing, or God does not care about evil, which means he is not perfectly good. This is called the problem of evil, and it has haunted theology for thousands of years. The ancient Hebrews had a simple answer. God is sovereign. He creates light and darkness, good and evil, as Isaiah chapter 45 verse 7 explicitly states. Whatever happens is God's will, even if we do not understand it. Job demands an explanation for his suffering, and God's answer is essentially that humans cannot comprehend divine purposes. Accept it, submit, do not question. But Christianity could not use that answer. Christianity claimed that God is love, that God wants a personal relationship with every human being, that God sent his Son to die for humanity's sins because he cares so deeply about human welfare. You cannot claim that God is intimately loving and then tell people that he directly causes their children to die of cancer. People will not worship a God like that. They will hate him. So Christianity needed a different explanation, and the devil provided it perfectly. Evil does not come from God. Evil comes from the devil. God is not the author of suffering. The devil is. God does not want you to suffer. The devil wants you to suffer. And God is actually fighting against the devil on your behalf. This solves the logical problem completely. God remains all-powerful, all-knowing, and perfectly good, and evil exists because of a rebellious angel who opposes God. It is not God's fault, it is the devil's fault. But Spinoza saw through this, because it creates a worse problem than it solves. If the devil is powerful enough to cause all the evil in the world, powerful enough to deceive nations, powerful enough to tempt even the faithful, then he is nearly as powerful as God, which means you now have two gods, one good and one evil, which is exactly what Zoroastrianism teaches, which means Christianity, despite claiming to be monotheistic, actually functions as a dualistic religion. And Spinoza rejected dualism completely. In his Ethics, he argued that there is only one substance in existence, and that substance is God, or nature. Everything that exists is a mode or expression of this one substance. There are no separate supernatural beings floating around causing things to happen. There is only the one infinite system of nature operating according to necessary laws. And in this system, evil is not a substance. It is not a thing. It is a privation, an absence, a lack of perfection. Just as darkness is the absence of light, and cold is the absence of heat, evil is the absence of understanding, of power, of harmony. When you are ignorant, you act in ways that harm yourself and others. When you are powerless, you suffer. When systems are disorganized, people experience injustice. But none of this requires a devil. It just requires the nature of finite existence. Spinoza's conclusion was radical. The devil does not exist. Angels and demons do not exist. Supernatural interventions do not happen. Everything that occurs follows necessarily from the nature of God, which is the same as the nature of reality itself. And when you understand this, you are freed from the fear and superstition that the church uses to control you. But Spinoza did not stop at the metaphysics. He asked a more dangerous question. If the devil does not exist, why did the church invent him? And the answer is political control. Think about what the devil does for the church. He provides an external enemy that justifies the church's existence. Without the devil, why do you need priests? Why do you need sacraments? Why do you need the church at all? But with the devil constantly attacking, constantly tempting, constantly trying to drag souls to hell, you need spiritual protection, and only the church can provide it. The church has sacraments that the devil cannot touch. Baptism removes the devil's claim on your soul through original sin. Communion gives you spiritual strength to resist temptation. Confession allows you to be cleansed after the devil has led you into sin. Exorcism can drive out demons if they possess you, and all of these require a priest. All of these happen inside church authority. The devil makes you dependent on the church for your spiritual survival. And the devil also explains the church's failures. When people pray and are not healed, it is not because God does not care or prayer does not work. It is because the devil is blocking the healing. When good people suffer, while evil people prosper, it is not because there is no divine justice. It is because the devil temporarily has power in this fallen world. When the church itself is corrupt, when priests abuse children or bishops live in luxury while the poor starve, it is not because the church is false. It is because the devil has infiltrated the church to destroy it from within. You see the pattern? The devil is an unfalsifiable excuse for every problem. Nothing can disprove the church's claims because any counter-evidence is just proof of the devil's interference. This is genius-level manipulation. But there is more. The devil creates a binary worldview that eliminates middle ground. You are either with God or with the devil. You are either in the church or serving Satan. You are either obedient or rebellious. There is no neutral position. There is no questioning without it being labeled as demonic influence. And this binary thinking makes dissent impossible. If you disagree with church teaching, you are not simply mistaken, you are under demonic influence. If you question church authority, you are not seeking truth. You are serving the devil's agenda to spread confusion and doubt. If you point out contradictions in the Bible or immorality in church history, you are not being rational. You are being used by Satan to destroy faith. Spinoza saw this firsthand. When he questioned traditional religious doctrines, the rabbis did not engage his arguments. They did not address his evidence. They excommunicated him and declared that he was cursed. And why? Because in a system where the devil exists, questioning is not intellectual honesty. It is spiritual danger. It must be suppressed immediately to protect the community from satanic corruption. And the most insidious part is how the devil enables the church to commit atrocities while claiming moral authority. Throughout history, the church has tortured and killed millions of people. Heretics burned at the stake, witches drowned, Jews massacred in pogroms, indigenous people slaughtered in crusades and conquests. And the justification was always the same. These people were influenced by the devil. They were spreading Satan's lies. They were threatening Christian souls. Therefore, killing them was not murder. It was spiritual warfare. It was saving souls by destroying bodies. The Inquisition tortured confessions out of people, and this was considered merciful because it gave them a chance to repent before execution. Burning witches alive was justified because it purified them through fire and prevented the devil from using them further. Forced conversions of Jews and Muslims were acts of love because the alternative was eternal damnation under Satan's rule. And none of this would have been possible without the devil. You cannot justify torture and genocide by appealing to a loving God, but you can justify it by appealing to a cosmic war against ultimate evil. The devil makes violence holy. He transforms oppression into liberation. He turns murder into mercy. And Spinoza understood that this dualism is the core mechanism of religious control, because once you accept that there is a devil, you give the church unlimited power over your mind. The church becomes the arbiter of what is from God and what is from the devil. You cannot trust your own thoughts, because the devil can plant evil ideas in your head. You cannot trust your own feelings, because the devil can disguise himself as an angel of light. You cannot trust your own reason, because the devil is the father of lies and can make falsehood seem like truth. You can only trust the church's interpretation of Scripture, the church's moral guidance, the church's authority, and this creates total dependence. You need the church to tell you if your doubt is from God leading you to deeper truth or from the devil leading you to damnation. You need the church to tell you if your suffering is God's purification or the devil's attack. You need the church to tell you if your prosperity is God's blessing or the devil's bribe to make you spiritually complacent. Without the church, you are defenseless against invisible spiritual forces that can destroy you eternally. And the church never lets you forget this. Sermons constantly remind you of the devil's schemes. Prayers constantly ask for protection from evil. Hymns constantly reference spiritual warfare. The entire religious system keeps you in a state of fear and dependency. And fear is the most effective control mechanism ever invented, because fear bypasses reason. When you are afraid, you do not think critically. You do not ask questions. You do not demand evidence. You obey. You conform. You submit. And you attack anyone who threatens the system that promises to keep you safe. Spinoza realized that this fear-based control is the true purpose of the devil doctrine. It is not theology. It is politics. It is not about explaining evil. It is about maintaining power. The church does not teach about the devil because they believe in him. They teach about the devil because belief in him makes people controllable. And when you reject the devil, you reject the entire control system. You reclaim the authority to think for yourself, to judge for yourself, to decide for yourself what is true and what is false. You are no longer dependent on priests to protect you from invisible enemies. You are no longer paralyzed by fear of eternal torture. You are no longer required to shut down your critical thinking in the name of faith. And this is why Spinoza was so dangerous. He did not just deny the devil's existence. He exposed the devil's function. He showed people the mechanism of their own mental enslavement. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Once you understand that the devil is a tool of control, you can never again be controlled by fear of him. The church did not just invent the devil through interpretation. They did it through deliberate mistranslation. And the evidence is in every Bible sitting on your shelf right now. Because the words you read in English are not what the original Hebrew and Greek actually say. Let us start with hell. The English word hell appears dozens of times in most Bible translations. It evokes images of fire and torture and eternal suffering. But the original texts use three completely different words with three completely different meanings, and none of them mean what you think hell means. In the Hebrew Old Testament, the word is Sheol, and Sheol simply means the grave or the underworld. It is where everyone goes when they die, good and evil alike. It is not a place of punishment. It is just death, the realm of the dead. When Jacob mourns his son Joseph, he says he will go down to Sheol in sorrow. When the psalmist prays for deliverance, he asks God to save him from Sheol. It is not hell. It is just the state of being dead. But when the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek, Sheol became Hades. And Hades, in Greek mythology, was the underworld, ruled by a god of the same name. It had regions of punishment for the wicked. It had the concept of judgment after death. So already the translation added ideas that were not in the original Hebrew. The grave became an underworld with moral significance. Then, when the Bible was translated into Latin, Hades became infernus, which means lower regions. And from infernus we get the English word inferno, which means a blazing fire. So the progression is clear. Sheol, the grave, became Hades, the mythological underworld, became infernus, the lower fiery regions, became hell, the place of eternal torture. Each translation added layers of meaning that did not exist in the original. And then there is Gehenna. This word appears in the New Testament, mostly in the teachings of Jesus, and modern Bibles translate it as hell. But Gehenna was not a theological concept. It was a geographic location. The Valley of Hinnom, Hinnom in Hebrew, was a real valley outside Jerusalem. It had been used for pagan child sacrifice in ancient times, which made it ceremonially unclean. By Jesus' era, it was the city garbage dump. Fires burned there constantly to consume the trash. Bodies of criminals and dead animals were thrown there. The dust from Dalith. When Jesus warned about Gehenna, he was using vivid local imagery. He was saying that rejecting his teachings would make you worthless, like trash thrown into the garbage dump. It was a metaphor for ultimate disgrace and destruction, not a literal description of an afterlife torture chamber. But the church translated Gehenna as hell and taught that Jesus was describing the devil's kingdom where unbelievers burn forever. And what about the devil's name, Lucifer? This is the most blatant mistranslation of all. It appears exactly once in most English Bibles, in Isaiah chapter 14 verse 12, "How you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning." And for centuries, preachers have used this verse to describe Satan's rebellion and fall from heaven. But the Hebrew text does not say Lucifer. It says Hillel ben Shakar, which means shining one, son of the dawn. And the context makes it absolutely clear that this is about the king of Babylon, not about an angel. The entire chapter is a taunt song against Babylon's king, who conquered nations and then was himself destroyed. The morning star imagery is comparing him to the planet Venus, which appears bright in the morning sky and then fades when the sun rises. The king rose to power and fell. That is it. That is the whole meaning. But when Jerome translated the Bible into Latin in the 4th century, he translated Hillel as Lucifer, which is Latin for light-bearer or morning star. And later Christian interpreters decided this was not really about Babylon's king. This was a hidden prophecy about Satan. They took a poetic metaphor about a human tyrant and turned it into the devil's origin story. And now Lucifer is universally recognized as Satan's name before his fall, even though that entire narrative is built on a mistranslation of a passage that has nothing to do with angels or demons. But mistranslation was not enough. The church also took passages that were clearly about something else and claimed they were secretly about the devil. They created a method of interpretation called typology, where any Old Testament passage could be reinterpreted as a hidden reference to Christ or to Satan. Ezekiel chapter 28 is addressed to the king of Tyre, a wealthy Phoenician city. The prophet uses exaggerated poetic language to mock the king's arrogance. You were in Eden, the garden of God. You were the anointed guardian cherub. You walked among the stones of fire. Your heart became proud because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. So God cast you down and destroyed you. Now, anyone reading this in context can see it is hyperbole. Ancient Near Eastern literature commonly used divine imagery to describe human kings. Egyptian pharaohs were called gods. Babylonian kings were said to ascend to heaven. This was the poetic style of the time. The king of Tyre is being mocked for thinking he is divine when he is just a mortal who will die like everyone else. But the church said no. This cannot be about a human king. Humans were not in Eden. Humans are not cherubs. This must be about Satan's original state before he fell. So they took poetry about human arrogance, and turned it into theology about angelic rebellion. The same thing happened with the serpent in Genesis chapter 3. The text describes it as the most clever of all the animals that God had made. It talks. It tempts Eve. God curses it to crawl on its belly. This is clearly a mythological tale, explaining why snakes do not have legs and why humans fear them. Ancient cultures had many such stories, but nowhere in Genesis does it say this serpent is Satan. Nowhere in the entire Old Testament is this serpent identified as the devil. But by the time of the New Testament, the connection had been made. The book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 9, calls the devil that ancient serpent who deceives the whole world. And suddenly, every Christian reading Genesis sees the serpent as Satan, even though the original author had no such idea. The church retroactively inserted the devil into the creation story. And this pattern continues throughout the Bible. Any passage that mentions an adversary, any reference to evil, any description of a spiritual being, the church claimed it was about the devil. They created a unified narrative by force, connecting dots that the original authors never connected. But here is the most disturbing part. The church knew they were doing this. They knew the original texts did not support their devil theology, and they suppressed anyone who pointed it out. In the early centuries of Christianity, there were many different interpretations of Scripture. Some Christians believed in a literal devil. Others saw Satan as a symbol of human evil. Others believed that all beings, including the devil, would eventually be saved and reconciled to God. This was theological diversity. This was honest debate about difficult questions. But the church could not tolerate diversity. They needed uniformity. They needed everyone to believe the same thing so they could maintain control. So they held councils. They declared certain interpretations orthodox and others heretical, and they used the power of the Roman Empire to enforce their decisions. Origen of Alexandria, one of the most brilliant early Christian thinkers, taught that the devil was not eternally evil. He argued that all rational beings, including Satan, had free will and could choose to return to God. God's love would eventually win everyone back. Hell was not eternal. It was corrective, like a hospital for sick souls. This was called universal reconciliation, and it was a common belief in the 3rd century, but the church condemned it. Why? Because if hell is not eternal, if the devil can be saved, then the threat of damnation loses its power. People are not as afraid. They are not as obedient. So Origen's teachings were declared heretical, his books were burned, and the idea of eternal hell became official doctrine. The same thing happened to anyone who questioned devil theology. In the medieval period, Christian scholars who studied Hebrew and noticed the mistranslations were pressured to conform. Jewish rabbis who pointed out that Christianity had misinterpreted their scriptures were ignored or persecuted. Renaissance humanists who wanted to return to the original languages and meanings of the Bible were accused of undermining faith. And then came Spinoza. He did not just notice the mistranslations, he exposed the entire system. He showed that the devil was invented, that the texts had been manipulated, that fear was being used for control. And the reaction was immediate and severe. His books were banned by both Christians and Jews. He was excommunicated. He lived the rest of his life in poverty and danger. Multiple attempts were made on his life. Why such extreme reaction? Because Spinoza threatened the foundation of religious power. If people realized the devil was invented, they would start questioning everything else. They would ask what else the church lied about. They would demand evidence instead of accepting authority. And the entire system of control would collapse. So the church did what it always does. It suppressed the truth. It maintained the lie. And it continued to use the devil to keep people afraid, obedient, and dependent. For another 300 years after Spinoza's death, the devil remained central to Christian teaching. And even today, even now, billions of people believe in a being whose existence is based on mistranslation, fabricated interpretation, and deliberate deception. On July 27, 1656, Baruch Spinoza walked into the synagogue in Amsterdam for the last time. He was 23 years old. He was a brilliant student of Jewish law and philosophy. He was respected in his community, and within hours, he would be erased from it completely. The rabbis had summoned him. They had heard rumors of his heretical ideas, that he questioned the divine authorship of the Torah, that he denied the existence of angels and demons, that he claimed God and nature were the same thing. They wanted him to recant. They wanted him to publicly affirm traditional beliefs and stop asking dangerous questions. But Spinoza refused. Not with anger, not with defiance, simply with honesty. He said he could not affirm what he did not believe to be true. He said reason and evidence led him to different conclusions than tradition taught. He said he was willing to discuss his ideas and hear counter-arguments, but he would not pretend to believe something just to avoid conflict. And the rabbis responded with the karam, the excommunication decree. And it was not a gentle separation, it was a curse. They proclaimed that Spinoza was cursed by day and cursed by night, cursed when he lies down and cursed when he rises up, cursed when he goes out and cursed when he comes in. No one was to speak with him. No one was to read his writings. No one was to do him any favor or stay under the same roof with him. He was to be cut off from the community of Israel completely. And here is what makes this relevant to the devil. The cherem did not specify what Spinoza had done wrong. It listed no clear charges. It quoted no specific heretical statements. It simply declared that he had abominable heresies and monstrous deeds. Vague accusations, no details, no opportunity for defense. And when Spinoza asked them to explain exactly which of his ideas was problematic so he could respond, they ignored him. They did not engage his arguments. They did not address his questions. They simply condemned him and declared the matter closed. And Spinoza saw the parallel immediately. This was exactly how the devil functions in religious systems. When you question, you are not answered, you are condemned. When you ask for evidence, you are not given proof, you are declared dangerous. When you demand rational discourse, you are not met with reason, you are met with excommunication. The rabbis needed to protect their authority, and Spinoza's questions threatened that authority. So they did what the church always does. They made him the enemy. They transformed intellectual disagreement into spiritual warfare. They labeled his search for truth as service to evil, and they removed him before his ideas could spread. But Spinoza did not respond with violence or bitterness. He responded with philosophy. He spent the next 20 years writing the Ethics, a systematic refutation of everything the religious authorities had taught him. And in that work, he dismantled the entire concept of supernatural good and evil. He argued that there is only one substance in existence, God or nature, and everything that happens is a necessary expression of that substance's nature. There are no angels, there are no demons, there is no devil tempting humans, there is no cosmic battle between good and evil. Instead, good and evil are human judgments based on how things affect us. Something is good if it increases our power to act, our understanding, our joy. Something is evil if it decreases these things. But this is relative to human perspective. A lion killing a gazelle is not evil, it is just nature. A disease destroying a body is not the devil's attack, it is just biology. A tyrant oppressing people is not possessed by Satan, he is acting from ignorance and disordered passions. And this changes everything about moral responsibility. If there is no devil, then you cannot blame your sins on demonic temptation. If there are no supernatural forces controlling you, then you are responsible for your own actions. Your choices come from your nature, your circumstances, your understanding. And if you want to become better, you do not need exorcism or prayer or priestly intervention. You need education, self-acknowledge, and the development of reason. Spinoza called this liberation. He said that most people live in bondage to their passions and to superstitious fears. They are controlled by external authorities who claim to protect them from invisible threats. But when you understand that these threats do not exist, when you realize that you are part of nature and subject to natural laws, when you take responsibility for your own development, you become free. And this freedom is what the church fears most, because free people do not need the church. They do not need priests to absolve their sins. They do not need rituals to ward off demons. They do not need authority figures to tell them what to believe. They can think for themselves, decide for themselves, live according to their own rational understanding of what is good. And Spinoza paid dearly for this freedom. After his excommunication, he lived in poverty. He supported himself by grinding lenses for microscopes and telescopes, work that eventually destroyed his lungs from inhaling glass dust. He never married. He never had children. He lived alone in rented rooms, writing philosophy that he knew would be banned. And the threats were constant. In 1672, a mob attacked his residence, angry at his political writings. He had to flee the city. Someone attempted to stab him on the street. He kept the torn cloak from that attack as a reminder of the cost of speaking truth. His books were published anonymously or posthumously, because putting his name on them would have meant immediate persecution. And when he died in 1677 at the age of 44, his lungs destroyed by his work, the church immediately moved to suppress his writings. The Ethics was published by his friends just months after his death, and within a year it was banned by the Catholic Church. It remained on the index of forbidden books for over 200 years. Why such fear? Why such extreme suppression? Because Spinoza had done something unforgivable. He had shown people the mechanism of their own mental slavery. He had revealed that the devil is a control tool, not a cosmic reality. He had proven that you do not need religious authority to be moral, to be free, to understand the universe. And that message is still dangerous today, because the devil is still being used to control people. The specifics have changed. The language has been updated, but the function remains the same. Create fear of an invisible enemy. Position the church as the only protection. Demand obedience in exchange for safety. Condemn anyone who questions as being influenced by evil. Spinoza's life was a refutation of this entire system. He questioned and was not destroyed. He left the religious community and did not become immoral. He denied the devil and lived a life of remarkable integrity and kindness. He proved by his existence that you do not need supernatural threats to be a good person. You just need reason, courage, and a commitment to truth. You might think that in the 21st century, with all our scientific knowledge and technological advancement, belief in the devil would have faded, but it has not. In fact, in some religious communities, devil theology is more prominent now than it has been in centuries, and it has become a massive industry. Turn on Christian television. You will see preachers warning about demonic attacks on your finances. Satan is blocking your prosperity. Demons are causing your business to fail. The devil does not want you to be successful because successful Christians glorify God. And the solution? Plant a seed offering. Send money to the ministry. Break the curse of poverty that demons have placed on your bloodline. This is not medieval superstition. This is modern televised religion reaching millions of people daily, and it is making certain preachers extraordinarily wealthy. Because when you convince people that invisible demons are stealing their money, they will pay you to fight those demons. It is brilliant financially, it is spiritually destructive. Or consider the exorcism ministries that have exploded in recent decades. Churches now have deliverance services where they cast demons out of believers, not just occasionally, weekly, sometimes daily. People line up to have demons of lust cast out, demons of anger, demons of depression, demons of addiction. Every human struggle is attributed to demonic possession, and this has created an entire economy. There are professional exorcists who travel internationally. There are conferences and training seminars on spiritual warfare. There are books and videos and online courses teaching you how to identify which specific demon is attacking you and how to cast it out. The Catholic Church has even reopened exorcism schools because demand has increased so dramatically. And what does this do to people psychologically? It teaches them that they are not responsible for their own behavior. If you are struggling with pornography, it is not because you have unhealthy patterns that need to be addressed through therapy and self-discipline. It is because a demon of lust has attached itself to you. If you are depressed, it is not because of chemical imbalance or unresolved trauma. It is because a spirit of heaviness is oppressing you. This is dangerous because it prevents people from getting real help. Instead of seeing a therapist, they go to deliverance sessions. Instead of addressing the actual causes of their problems, they perform rituals to cast out entities that do not exist. And when the problems do not go away, they are told they do not have enough faith, or there are more demons that need to be identified and removed. And the preachers who promote this never lose. If the deliverance works, it proves their power and authority. If it does not work, it proves the person needs more deliverance sessions, more prayer, more financial giving to break the demonic stronghold. It is an unfalsifiable system that keeps people trapped in dependency. But here is what Spinoza would say about this. These preachers are doing exactly what the medieval church did. They are using fear of invisible enemies to maintain control and extract resources. The language has changed from Latin to English. The setting has changed from cathedrals to megachurches. But the mechanism is identical. Create a threat that cannot be disproven. Position yourself as the solution. Profit from people's fear. But the devil serves another function in modern religion. He is a convenient scapegoat for the church's own failures and sins. And this pattern is devastatingly consistent. When Catholic priests were exposed for sexually abusing thousands of children over decades, what was the church's response? Some officials blamed the devil. They said Satan had infiltrated the church to destroy it from within. They said these priests had been attacked by demonic forces of perversion. They framed it as spiritual warfare rather than institutional corruption and criminal behavior. This is projection. This is refusing to take responsibility by blaming an external entity, and it allows the institution to avoid real reform. Because if the problem is demonic attack, the solution is more prayer and vigilance, not structural change. You do not need to examine how the hierarchy protected abusers. You do not need to question the culture of secrecy. You do not need to hold leaders accountable. You just need to fight the devil harder. The same pattern appears with financial scandals. When megachurch pastors are caught living in multi-million-dollar mansions while their congregations struggle with poverty, the explanation is often that the devil is attacking them with accusations. The devil does not want the church to have resources. The devil stirs up criticism to divide the body of Christ. So questioning the pastor's wealth is not legitimate concern about exploitation. It is demonic attack. Or when churches split over theological disagreements, both sides claim the other is being influenced by Satan. There is no acknowledgement that reasonable people can interpret texts differently. There is no room for honest intellectual disagreement. It is immediately spiritualized. If you disagree with my interpretation, you are listening to demons. And this prevents any kind of honest self-examination. Because if all criticism comes from the devil, then you never have to consider whether the criticism might be valid. You never have to ask if you might be wrong. You never have to engage with different perspectives. You just dismiss everything as spiritual attack and continue exactly as before. Spinoza saw this clearly. He argued that when people refuse to examine the real causes of problems, when they attribute everything to supernatural forces, they remain in ignorance. And ignorance is bondage. Because you cannot solve a problem if you will not acknowledge its real nature. When priests abuse children, the cause is not demons. The cause is a combination of factors including systems that give men unchecked power over vulnerable people, cultures that prioritize institutional reputation over victim protection, and psychological issues that need professional treatment. When pastors exploit their congregations financially, the cause is not Satan, the cause is greed enabled by lack of accountability and financial transparency. But it is much easier to blame the devil, because fighting demons requires no institutional change. It requires no transparency. It requires no accountability. You just perform some rituals, declare victory in spiritual warfare, and continue exactly as before. And then there is the political use of devil rhetoric. And this might be the most dangerous application in modern religion, because it transforms political disagreement into cosmic warfare. In many religious communities, political opponents are literally demonized. Not metaphorically, literally. Progressive Christians are accused of promoting the devil's agenda. Liberal politicians are called servants of Satan. Social movements for equality are labeled as demonic deception. And this is not fringe belief. This is mainstream religious political discourse. Consider the rhetoric around LGBTQ rights. Many religious leaders do not frame this as a debate about civil rights or interpretation of ancient texts. They frame it as spiritual warfare. They say the devil is using the gay agenda to destroy the family, to corrupt children, to bring God's judgment on the nation. They call Pride Month a demonic celebration. They say that accepting transgender people is demonic confusion about God's created order. And when you label your political opponents as literally serving the devil, what does that do to the possibility of dialogue? How can you have a reasonable conversation with someone you believe is advancing Satan's plan to destroy civilization? You cannot. That is the point. Devil rhetoric shuts down conversation. It eliminates the need to engage with actual arguments, because if something is demonic, you do not debate it. You oppose it absolutely. The same thing happens with evolution and science. Many religious communities teach that evolution is the devil's lie designed to make people reject God. Climate science is dismissed as demonic deception to create global government. Medical science is questioned because vaccines might be the mark of the beast. Any knowledge that conflicts with religious belief is potentially demonic, and this creates a population that is unreachable by evidence, because evidence comes from scientists, and scientists might be deceived by demons. So the evidence itself is suspect. The only trustworthy source of information is religious authority. And religious authority has already told you that these ideas are from the devil. This is exactly what Spinoza warned about. When you attribute things to supernatural forces, you make rational discourse impossible. You create tribalism, where the world is divided into us versus them, God's people versus Satan's people, truth versus demonic lies. And in that environment, democracy cannot function, because democracy requires the assumption that your opponents are fellow citizens with different views, not enemies of God, requiring spiritual defeat. And the most insidious part is how this rhetoric is used to justify cruelty. If someone is promoting the devil's agenda, then being kind to them is being soft on evil. Showing them compassion is enabling Satan. Therefore, discrimination becomes righteous. Exclusion becomes holy. Political violence becomes spiritual warfare. We have seen this throughout history. When you dehumanize your opponents by calling them demonic, atrocities become possible. The Crusades, the Inquisition, the witch burnings, the religious wars, all justified by the belief that the other side was literally serving the devil and had to be destroyed. And it is happening now, when protesters are called demonic mobs, when political opponents are accused of drinking children's blood in satanic rituals, when conspiracy theories blend politics with spiritual warfare. This is dangerous. This is the same mechanism that has justified violence for centuries. Spinoza's solution was simple but radical. Stop attributing things to supernatural forces. Understand natural causes. Recognize that people you disagree with are still human beings, acting from their own understanding and circumstances. Engage with ideas, not with accusations of demonic influence, and build ethics on reason, and shared human values, not on fear of invisible enemies. Because when you remove the devil from the equation, political disagreements become just that, disagreements. Not cosmic warfare, not spiritual battles, just humans with different perspectives trying to build a society together. And that is difficult enough without adding demons to the mix. So if there is no devil, if there is no cosmic battle between good and evil, if there are no demons tempting you and angels protecting you, then how do you determine what is right and wrong? This is the question that terrifies religious authorities, because they assume that without supernatural threats and rewards, morality collapses. People will do whatever they want. Society will descend into chaos. But Spinoza proved this assumption completely false. In his Ethics, he built a moral system that requires no devil, no hell, no divine commandments, no supernatural enforcement. And it is more coherent and more liberating than anything religious authority has ever offered. His starting point is simple. Good is whatever increases your power to act, to understand, to experience joy. Evil is whatever decreases these capacities. And this is not arbitrary. It is based on the nature of existence itself. Think about it practically. When you learn something true, when you gain genuine understanding, you become more capable. You can make better decisions. You can solve problems more effectively. You can navigate life with more skill. This is objectively good because it increases your power. When you are deceived, when you believe falsehoods, you become less capable. You make worse decisions. You create problems for yourself. This is objectively evil because it decreases your power. The same applies to emotions. When you experience joy that comes from real achievement, from genuine connection, from the expansion of your abilities, this strengthens you. It gives you energy. It makes you more resilient. But when you experience sadness, fear, hatred, these emotions drain you. They make you passive. They reduce your capacity to act effectively in the world. And here is the crucial insight. You do not need a devil to explain why people do harmful things. People act harmfully because they are ignorant. They do not understand the real consequences of their actions. They are driven by disordered passions that they have not learned to regulate. They are responding to circumstances that have shaped them in destructive ways. A person who steals is not possessed by a demon of greed. That person either does not understand that stealing ultimately harms everyone, including themselves, by breaking down social trust, or that person is in such desperate circumstances that stealing seems like the only option for survival. Either way, the solution is not exorcism. The solution is education and changing the circumstances that make theft seem necessary. A person who is violent is not influenced by demons of rage. That person has learned violence as a response to problems, usually because they experienced violence themselves or grew up in an environment where violence was normalized. The solution is not casting out evil spirits. The solution is therapy, education, and creating social conditions where violence is not rewarded or necessary. And this completely changes how you approach morality. Instead of judging people as good or evil, righteous or wicked, saved or damned, you understand them as more or less developed in their rational capacities. Some people have greater understanding, some people have better emotional regulation, some people have been fortunate in their circumstances. And these differences are not supernatural, they are natural, and they can be addressed through natural means. And when you adopt this naturalistic ethics, something profound happens. You become free from fear, and this is not a small thing. This is the entire point. Religious morality is fundamentally based on fear. Fear of hell, fear of divine punishment, fear of demonic attack, fear of losing salvation, fear of being on the wrong side of cosmic warfare. And this fear is supposed to motivate you to be good, but it does not. It just makes you anxious, obedient, and dependent on religious authority to tell you if you are safe. Think about what it does to your psychology when you believe the devil is constantly trying to tempt you. Every thought becomes suspect. Every desire becomes potentially demonic. Every mistake becomes evidence that Satan has gotten to you. You cannot trust yourself. You are in a constant state of spiritual warfare inside your own mind. And the church offers relief from this warfare, but only temporary relief. You confess your sins and you are forgiven, but tomorrow the devil will attack again. You pray for protection and God grants it, but you must keep praying because the protection is not permanent. You attend church, you take communion, you perform the rituals, and these things strengthen you spiritually. But you can never let your guard down because the moment you do, demons will exploit the weakness. This is exhausting, this is psychologically damaging, and it keeps you coming back to the church for more protection, more forgiveness, more spiritual strength. It is a cycle of dependency that never ends. But Spinoza's ethics eliminates all of this. There is no devil to fear. There are no demons attacking you. Your thoughts are just thoughts, produced by your brain based on your experiences and circumstances. Your desires are natural expressions of your biological and psychological nature. Your mistakes are learning opportunities, not evidence of spiritual failure. And morality becomes something you choose because it benefits you, not because you are afraid of supernatural consequences. You tell the truth because deception creates complicated problems that are hard to maintain and ultimately backfire. You treat people well because good relationships enhance your life and bad relationships diminish it. You develop your capacities because growth is intrinsically satisfying and increases your ability to achieve your goals. There is no need for priests to absolve you. There is no need for rituals to protect you. There is no need for authorities to tell you what is right and wrong. You can figure it out yourself, based on reason, based on understanding cause and effect, based on recognizing what actually increases human flourishing and what diminishes it. And this is freedom, real freedom, not the fake freedom that religion offers, where you are free to choose God or choose hell, but actual freedom, where you are the author of your own moral development, where you take responsibility for your choices, where you are not controlled by fear of invisible threats. And here is something beautiful that emerges from Spinoza's ethics. When you stop believing in the devil, you stop demonizing people, and this opens the door to genuine compassion. Religious morality divides people into the righteous and the wicked, the saved and the damned, those who serve God and those who serve Satan. And this division makes compassion almost impossible. Because why would you have compassion for someone who is serving the devil? They are evil, they deserve punishment, they are the enemy. But when you understand that people are not evil essences but products of circumstances and understanding, everything changes. A criminal is not a demon-possessed monster. A criminal is a human being who developed in certain conditions and learned certain patterns of behavior that are harmful. And that means change is possible. Rehabilitation is possible. Redemption is possible. Not through supernatural intervention, but through education, therapy, changed circumstances, and the development of understanding. This does not mean you excuse harmful behavior. It means you address it rationally. You protect society from people who are currently dangerous, but you also recognize that most people who do harmful things are themselves suffering from ignorance, from trauma, from disordered passions that they do not know how to regulate. And when you see this, you can respond with both firmness and compassion. You can say this behavior is unacceptable and must stop, while also saying this person is not beyond help, not fundamentally evil, not irredeemable. You can hold people accountable while also working to change the conditions that produce harmful behavior. You can create a justice system based on rehabilitation and restoration rather than pure punishment and retribution. And you can extend this compassion to yourself. When you make mistakes, when you struggle with destructive patterns, you do not have to see yourself as wicked or demon-influenced. You can see yourself as a human being who is still developing, who is still learning, who is working to increase your understanding and regulate your passions more effectively. You can have self-compassion without self-indulgence. You can acknowledge your failings while also committing to growth. And this creates a completely different kind of society. A society where people are not divided into good and evil, saved and damned, righteous and wicked. A society where everyone is understood as capable of both harm and healing, both ignorance and growth. A society based on education and development rather than fear and punishment. A society where morality comes from understanding rather than supernatural threats. This is what becomes possible when you reject the devil, not moral chaos, not the collapse of ethics, but a more mature, more compassionate, more rational approach to human behavior and human flourishing. This is Spinoza's gift. This is what he risked everything to give us. And it is still revolutionary today. The church gained power by inventing the devil. But what did it lose? What did humanity lose when this lie became the foundation of Western religion? The answer is devastating. The original Hebrew wisdom understood something profound about evil. Evil is not a presence, it is an absence. It is the absence of understanding, the absence of harmony, the absence of proper order. When you lack knowledge, you make mistakes. When systems lack justice, people suffer. When communities lack cooperation, conflict arises. This is evil, not a demon, not a cosmic force, just the natural consequence of incompleteness and imperfection in a finite world. And this understanding places responsibility exactly where it belongs, on humans, on systems, on the choices we make and the structures we build. If there is injustice in the world, it is because humans created unjust systems. If there is suffering, it is because we have not yet learned how to organize society to minimize suffering. If there is ignorance, it is because we have not prioritized education and truth. But when you invent the devil, you externalize all of this. Injustice is not our fault. It is the devil's influence. Suffering is not something we can prevent through better systems. It is spiritual attack. Ignorance is not a problem we can solve through education. It is demonic deception that can only be countered through faith and obedience to religious authority. And this externalization absolves everyone of responsibility. The church does not have to address systemic injustice, because the real problem is spiritual, not structural. Governments do not have to create better policies, because human effort cannot defeat demonic forces. Individuals do not have to work on themselves, because their problems come from external entities, not internal patterns. The ancient Hebrews knew better. They knew that when you do evil, consequences follow naturally. Not because God is punishing you, not because demons are attacking you, but because reality has structure. Actions have outcomes. Choices create patterns. And the world depends on reality. The act is just as important as the result, And if you want different results, you must make different choices and build different systems. This is wisdom. This is taking the world seriously. This is recognizing that we are responsible for creating the conditions of our own lives and societies. But the church traded this wisdom for control. They said, the problem is not your choices or your systems. The problem is supernatural evil, and only we can protect you from it. Submit to us, obey us, fund us, and we will keep you safe from the devil. And humanity lost the ability to address real problems rationally, because every problem became a spiritual problem requiring religious solutions, rather than a practical problem requiring human solutions. But when you reject the devil, when you recognize that this entire mythology is invented, something remarkable happens. You reclaim your power. You reclaim your responsibility. You reclaim your freedom. First, you gain mental freedom. The fear that has been controlling you disappears. You are not being watched by demons. You are not under constant spiritual attack. Your thoughts are your own. Your struggles are natural human struggles, not evidence of demonic influence. And this relief is immense. You can finally relax inside your own mind. Second, You gain moral agency. You are good not because you fear hell or because you are trying to resist demonic temptation. You are good because you understand that goodness benefits you and everyone around you. Your morality comes from within, from your own rational understanding of what creates flourishing, and this makes your goodness authentic rather than coerced. Third, you gain critical thinking. When you stop attributing things to supernatural forces, you start asking about natural causes. Why do I struggle with this pattern? What circumstances created this situation? What systems are producing these outcomes? And when you ask these questions, you can find real answers and make real changes. You are no longer trapped in the unfalsifiable logic of spiritual warfare, where every problem is blamed on invisible enemies that you can never fully defeat. Fourth, you gain compassion. When you stop seeing people as demon-possessed or wicked by nature, you start seeing them as fellow humans navigating difficult circumstances with varying levels of understanding and resources. And this opens your heart. You can oppose harmful behavior while still recognizing the humanity of the person engaging in it. You can work for justice without demonizing your opponents. And fifth, you gain peace. The universe is not a battleground between good and evil. It is a natural system operating according to comprehensible laws. You are not a soldier in a cosmic war. You are a finite being learning to navigate existence with increasing wisdom. And when you understand this, the anxiety that religion creates dissolves. You can simply live, simply grow, simply work to increase your understanding and capacity for joy. This is what Spinoza wanted for humanity. Not the destruction of ethics, not the collapse of meaning, but liberation from the fear-based control system that the devil represents. Liberation into a world where you take responsibility for yourself, where you address real causes of real problems, where morality comes from understanding rather than supernatural threats. And this liberation is available right now. You do not need permission from religious authorities. You do not need to gradually work up to it. You simply recognize that the devil is a fiction created for political control. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And once you are free, you can never go back to the prison of superstitious fear. You have just discovered something the church has hidden for centuries. The true story of how religion invented the devil. The story of how fear became the most powerful control mechanism in human history. The story of how Baruch Spinoza risked everything to expose this lie. You learned how Satan evolved from a minor job title in the Hebrew Bible into Christianity's cosmic villain. How Persian dualism infected Jewish theology during the Babylonian exile. How the church deliberately mistranslated texts, turning Sheol into hell and Hillel into Lucifer. How they fabricated biblical support by reinterpreting passages about human kings as prophecies about fallen angels. You discovered why the church needed the devil to exist, to solve the problem of evil without blaming God, to create dependency on religious authority for spiritual protection, to justify atrocities as holy warfare against demonic forces, to shut down questioning by labeling dissent as satanic influence. And you learned about Spinoza's courageous alternative, a naturalistic ethics based on understanding rather than fear, a vision of freedom where you are responsible for your own moral development, a compassionate approach that sees people as struggling humans, not demon-possessed enemies. Each video like this requires months of research, diving into ancient Hebrew and Greek texts that most people never read, comparing translations to expose deliberate distortions, reading banned philosophical works that the church suppressed for centuries, reconstructing arguments that religious authorities have spent 2,000 years trying to erase. The super thanks down below is not just financial support. It is you saying that truth matters more than comfortable lies, that understanding matters more than obedience, that human freedom matters more than religious control. It is you standing with those who question, not those who blindly submit. And it allows this work to continue to expose more lies, to reveal more suppressed history, to give more people the tools to think for themselves and break free from fear-based manipulation. Every contribution, no matter the amount, sends a message. It says that Spinoza's courage was not in vain, that his sacrifice meant something, that the truth he died to reveal still matters today. And now, a direct question for you. Have you ever been controlled by fear of the devil? Have you ever blamed demons for your struggles instead of addressing the real causes? Have you ever been told that questioning church teaching was satanic influence? If so, you are not alone. Millions of people have been trapped in this exact system. Millions have lived in terror of invisible enemies that do not exist. Millions have given their money, their time, their mental freedom to religious authorities who promise protection from threats they themselves invented. And here is the truth. You were never under demonic attack. You were under psychological manipulation. Your doubts were not the devil whispering lies. Your doubts were your rational mind recognizing contradictions and demanding evidence. Your struggles were not spiritual warfare. Your struggles were natural human challenges that required practical solutions, not exorcisms. Have you seen others demonized for disagreeing with the church? Have you watched as people were labeled as satanic simply for asking questions? Have you witnessed the cruelty that happens when religious communities believe they are fighting demons instead of engaging with fellow humans? If you have experienced any of this, you are a child of Spinoza. Not because you committed violence, not because you rejected all morality, but because you questioned, because you demanded that beliefs make sense, because you refused to surrender your mind to fear-based control. And the world desperately needs more children of Spinoza, more people who ask why instead of blindly accepting what they are told, more people who recognize that supernatural threats are tools of manipulation, more people who build their ethics on understanding and compassion rather than on fear of invisible enemies. Comment below if you identify with this struggle. Share your experience of breaking free from devil theology. Tell your story of how you stopped believing in demons and started taking responsibility for your own development. And if you know someone who is still trapped in fear of the devil, someone who blames every problem on demonic attack, someone who cannot question their religion without being told they are under satanic influence, tag them. Share this video with them, because information like this liberates. Truth like this breaks chains. And whoever found this video, it was not an accident. It was not the algorithm. It was not random chance. It was the recognition of a kindred spirit, someone who values truth over comfort, someone who chooses understanding over fear, someone who is ready to see the world as it actually is, rather than through the distorted lens of religious mythology. Welcome to freedom. Welcome to responsibility. Welcome to a life where you are no longer controlled by fear of imaginary enemies. This is what Spinoza died to give you, and it is yours right now if you choose to claim it.